How I Stopped Leaking, Cassie's story. Have you ever wanted to know, man, does that program that Polly sells, is her method, like, could it work for me? Well, today I want to share with you one of the stories of my patient, and I will be honest, I have changed her name for privacy, and I've changed a few details about her life, but they don't relate to her physically. So I will talk to you about a couple different things, and I'll point out the parts that I changed so that you know, so you can see that it didn't really have much to do with her symptoms necessarily. So Cassie, if you will, she came to me and we worked online together. And so one of the offers that I have is that I do online coaching. And so it's one-on-one access to me for almost 3 months of time. Sometimes we do it longer. But anyway, so she came to me and she had 3 kiddos. Her oldest at the time was 7, her next was 4, and then her next after that was 2. And she had torn with her first child, and she had torn with her second, but she did not tear with her third. She enjoyed exercising quite a bit before she got pregnant with kids. She tried exercising quite a bit after her first baby 7 years ago, and she said that she was leaking and she had some pain vaginally, and she was doing, I think she said it was like step aerobics and some weight training at the gym. And she said she just couldn't do it because she was leaking and she had some pain. So she put it on the back burner and didn't worry a thing about it. And she said she would try to be active when she could, but it wasn't really, she wasn't very consistent with it. Sometimes she would, make that effort like, okay, I'm going to be so good with my workouts. And then it would kind of taper off. And then she had her next baby 4 years later. And she tore with this baby. I think I said that right. She tore with her first, her second, not her third. And same thing. She had some leaking with activity where she would pee her pants, coughing, sneezing, laughing. And then she said, okay, I'm really going to get serious about this. And she purchased, I won't say the name, but she purchased someone's pelvic floor program to help her stop leaking. Because she said a friend of hers had recommended it. But when I was asking her questions, I had asked her, I'm like, okay, well, did this program work for your friend? And she said no, but she just thought it was good. And I said, okay, it's an interesting way to look at it, that it's good, even though it didn't work for her. So the other interesting thing about that was she bought this program and she was faithful. So she sat down and told me all the stuff that she was doing, like how she did it every single day. She did exactly like she was supposed to. She took notes about it too, which I thought was really quite phenomenal. And she said that she was actually getting worse. And my guess is because of some of the methods that she was being taught, which I'll get to that a little bit here in her story. And then she said that she just felt so defeated because she had done everything that she was told to do. She was recommended this program by somebody else, even though it didn't work for them. And she said that she just felt so deflated, like she had lost all hope. And then her last one, that she had 2 years, she said it kind of was an accident. She wasn't planning on it. She just felt like she had lost her whole body. She didn't feel connected to it anymore. She was having some issues with intimacy, some pain, difficulty with reaching orgasm. And so then when she had this baby, she felt like she just gave up. She absolutely gave up because she had already tried to do all these things. She'd worked so hard and she just felt like there was no hope. I feel like I've said that over and over, but I'm also kind of replaying some of the things that she said is, I felt defeated, I felt deflated, and I had no hope. I lost my hope. I didn't feel like I had my body. I didn't feel like I had my body anymore. I didn't even recognize it. She's like, it looked the same in the mirror, but it didn't function. It didn't feel the same. And one of her neighbors was one of my patients and had recommended her to come to me. And she said, I don't think so. That pelvic floor stuff, it doesn't work. And so she had called me and we had a chance to talk. It's very similar to what I have now, the Your Pelvic Floor is Next Step call. And so we just chatted, and I thought, you know what, she just feels, I can tell how frustrated she is. And while I really wanted to help her and take a crack at it, I knew that she needed to feel like there was some level of hope. And so I walked her through my No Kegels University Method. We talked about phase 1, how your tissues need to move and move well. And I talked to her where she had torn with her first 2 babies, and she kept saying, well, it was so long ago. It was so long ago. And I kept telling her back, it actually doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much your scar is. It actually still needs to work. And I've seen mamas that their youngest was 27 and their scar was still freezing those tissues in place. And that's why they weren't able to make those changes and still struggle with leaking, because they never worked on that scar. So while we were talking, she piped up about she tried the program, and she said, well, that program never talked to me about that, but that makes sense. That makes sense that I should be working on that scar, that scar tissue could be keeping my muscles from working. And I said, okay, great. Why don't you start with that? And she's like, well, tell me more about this method. I don't really know, because I didn't want her to feel like she had to do this. I didn't want her to feel like I was trying to con her or anything, which I wasn't. I knew I could help her, but again, I wanted her to feel that as well. So then we moved on to phase 2, where we were talking about getting her pressure system intact. And she said, well, I know about this breathing that you're talking about, because one of the big pieces that I like to include with the pressure system being intact for phase 2 is balloon breathing, where when we inhale, we want that belly to expand and blow up very much like a balloon. But also we need that pelvic floor to drop as well, because if we're utilizing that idea of a balloon, which is why I like to call it balloon breathing, the bottom of that balloon, if that's blowing up, it has to go somewhere. So the bottom of that balloon is going to blow or expand or inflate down into that pelvic floor and have it lengthen. And then when we exhale, the air out of our lungs deflates, the air out of that balloon, and our belly deflates, and then that pelvic floor rises. And she says, yeah, they taught me that, but I'm supposed to contract that pelvic floor when I exhale. And I said, oh, okay. Well, what if you tried not doing that? And she says, well, why? I just was trying to get my pelvic floor stronger, like they said. Like, that makes sense to me that I should contract it. And I said, I suppose, but let me offer you this idea of thinking. When we breathe, we don't have to tell our muscles what to do when we breathe, right? And I remember her saying, well, yeah. And I said, okay. So why are we telling our pelvic floor to tighten when we exhale if the breathing should just be very natural? And the phone went quiet, and I thought, oh my gosh, I probably offended her, because I said exactly what I think. I talked to her about my logic and my rationale, and she comes back and says, I've never thought about it that way. That makes so much sense to me. And I said, great. And so I said, okay, you know what? Why don't you go work on that scar massage like we talked about? And then why don't you practice that breathing like we talked about? Just don't tighten your pelvic floor and see what happens. And she said, wait, tell me more about this method you have. And so then we talked about strengthening through the VAB3 principles, which stands for V is for vertical, A is for above the pelvis, B is for below the pelvis, and 3 is in all 3 planes. And I talked to her about how a pelvic floor strengthening exercise, at least in my method, is pulling 2 of those 4 principles and utilizing that or holding those principles up against another exercise to count it as a pelvic floor strengthening exercise, because all those 4 ways, vertical, above the pelvis, below the pelvis, and all 3 planes, that is how that pelvic floor functions already. And so we're just utilizing what the body's already doing. So we kept talking, and she said, wait, so we're not doing any Kegels? And I said, no, we're not doing any Kegels. And she says, oh, I guess you said that with No Kegels University Method, huh? Which had me giggling, but I was trying, I didn't want her to feel like I was selling to her at all. So anyways, we continue on with the conversation, and of course, phase 4 is maintenance mode. And I said, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go home, and I want you to work on this for 2 weeks. I don't want you to commit to anything, because she's like, well, tell me about your programs. And so I told her, but I said, I just want you to go home and work for 2 weeks on your own. Just 2 weeks, that's it. And I want to see what happens with the breathing and so breathing, that pelvic floor is going to lengthen. And then I want that scar massage, I want to see what happens to your body. Because like I said, she was leaking with activity, like laughing, running, coughing, sneezing. She could bend over and pick up her kiddos and she would leak. And so I was awaiting her call in the next 2 weeks. And within 1 week, she calls me back and she says, "What kind of witchcraft is this?" And I said, "Did it go well?" And she said, "Yes, it did." And I said, "Okay, great. Tell me about it." And she says, so she was telling me, she says that everything that I told her to do was opposite of what she did or what she was told in her previous program. And because she took such copious notes, she took what I told her and she compared it to what she was doing. And she said, it literally is opposite. She was like, I think that's why, one, I was willing to try it because it was totally opposite of what I had done before. But it seemed to make sense if, we're using this method based on how the body works naturally and physiologically. And I said, yes. And I said, well, okay, you said witchcraft. Did you have any results? Did you have any outcomes? And she said within the first couple of days of doing the scar massage and doing the balloon breathing, she said that she could bend over and pick up her kid, didn't leak. She could bend over and pick up the load of laundry, didn't leak. She said that she had a big Costco trip. It was Costco. And she said that, the up and down, and having to turn, she said she would normally leak by the end of her Costco trip. Because that pelvic floor is supposed to help with all of those, with the support of the organs and responding to the up and down pressure and, all the twisting and such. Anyways, so I said, oh, that's lovely. So you've had quite a bit of less leakage. And she said, yeah, why is this working this way? And I said, the beautiful thing is we haven't even touched getting your pelvic floor stronger. All we've done is we have said, okay, this is how the body works naturally and physiologically. This is how the pelvic floor works naturally and physiologically. And so all I did with those first 2 steps that I had her do, not that that's the exact first 2 steps for everyone, but I had her work on those. And within the first couple of days, she was already leaking less. And she called me before that 2 weeks was up. And I said, okay, well, do you want to keep working with me? Do you want to just kind of see how it goes? I could tell how hurt and defeated she was previously. I just didn't want to pressure her into anything. And she says, of course I want to work with you. If you made this much change in the first 3 days, I'd love to see what you can do in a month. And I said, super. So she signed up for the Elite Pelvic Floor Coaching and Training Package, where we would Marco Polo back and forth every day, every couple of days, where we dug into those steps quite a bit more, or those phases. So we really dug into what her tissue was doing, and she would talk to me about how it was going, and then I would have her send me videos of her working on things inside phase 2 with that pressure system, how she was doing her balloon breathing, showing me her rib cage and how it was moving and her thoracic mobility and hip mobility, all these things. And then we started working into strengthening. And by this point, a month into it, she had gotten rid of all of her leakage. All of it was gone. Now, I don't necessarily recommend, and I had offered to her, okay, we can be done coaching, but I want you to keep going. I want you to plug in phase 4 maintenance mode so that we're still working on these things. And she said, okay, that's fine. I'll just keep working with you because again, in 1 month, we were able to get rid of her leakage all the way. But I also knew that her pelvic floor needed more time to have that strength, whether she worked with me or not on it. But anyway, she agreed to it. And here's some of the other things that she experienced as well. She had said that she had more energy. So, as a mom, when you hit that afternoon slump and you're just dragging and you want to eat something sweet, maybe you feel like you need caffeine, maybe you need to take a nap. She said that she quit feeling that afternoon slump and she wasn't reaching for her Diet Dr. Pepper anymore. That changed. She drank something else, but we're going to use Diet Dr. Pepper for this. It was caffeine though, and which I thought was really amazing. I've seen this before in other patients and coaching clients, but she says, well, she asked me when she was telling me, she said, I just noticed I have more energy. I'm not needing all that. Why? And I said, that's the beautiful thing about the pelvic floor, is that because we forget it and because it's weak, we don't realize that our movement patterns become less efficient because that muscle is weak. So as her pelvic floor was doing more of what it should, it had more mobility because of phase 1. It was functioning better because her pressure system was working more optimally than what it was. And then when we got into strengthening, her having a stronger pelvic floor made all the world of the difference for her body throughout the whole entire chain as she was moving throughout her day and doing her things. Then she said, okay, I also went back to those same exercises that I was doing after my first baby because this part I've changed a little bit. She had a different workout routine before she had her very first baby, but after her first baby, she was doing some cardio classes and doing some weights. And she said, oh man, I felt very brave. And I went to a group fitness class. And she said, I just kept waiting. I kept waiting for me to leak and I never did. And I said, that's great. And she goes, it's because when she was telling me the story, she said, it's because I went to the bathroom beforehand. I emptied my bladder. There wasn't anything there to leak. And I said, oh, okay, well, just keep me posted. And she goes, but then I did it again the next day and I went in with a full bladder. Like I drank a ton of water that morning and I said, okay, well, did you leak? Because it could happen. And she said, no, I didn't. And it just was like music to my ears. And then the third thing, I don't think she noticed this. So because we do this on Marco Polo, I got to see her face and I was hesitant pointing this out to her because if you remember, when I was talking to her, she just kept saying, I felt defeated. I felt like I didn't have any hope. I didn't recognize my body. And the thing I noticed about her when she was going through those, like walking me through some of that, was just the tone of voice. It wasn't really that great. And even in the beginning of our Marco Polos, like just, I don't want to say she looked sad, but she just looked, I don't know, kind of like Eeyore in Winnie the Pooh is who comes to mind. But by the time we were done, she was vibrant and happy and glowing and just like she was starting new hobbies that she hadn't done in a long time, all because she had this energy. Her body was showing up for her the way that she wanted it to, the way that she needed it to. Because the other thing is in this entire meantime is she had a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old that she was struggling to keep up with because of what was happening with her body. And by the end, she said, yeah, we play outside as much as we possibly can. I take him to the parks. And she said when one of this part of the story I won't say because it may or may not give it away because I have another patient or two that's kind of similar. One of her children played a particular sport. And while they were at that sport, her and her other two would actually play. And she says, I can finally do that now. Before I was hesitant to do it because I just was convinced I would leak. So now she's able to be a better mother. And I could go on and tell you about more of her wins. And I feel like I've probably gone on long enough, but I wanted to be able to tell you her story. One, this is a pretty incredible story where she had change within the first couple of days. And I wish I could say she was totally an outlier. It's not uncommon that I have patients that have radical change like that in the first couple days, in the first couple weeks. Truly, I'm not that surprised by it. And I wanted to tell you that story because if you relate to this story, I would love for you and I to chat and just see, maybe is this a good fit? Maybe if it's not. And I wanted to spend the time telling you Cassie's story because I've been doing this for almost 14 years at this point. And so many women, while each of your stories is very different, there's also a lot of similarities. There's also a lot of similar presentations. You're tired, you're leaking, you're not doing the things that you want to do. You're not showing up as a mom like you want to do. You're tired, your body you may not even recognize your body. And I think it's important to realize that you have the ability, you have the opportunity to be able to make some of these changes without that much effort. And the other part that I'll add here too is that I don't give you homework to do that takes longer than 10 minutes a day. Maybe 12, but it's not all the time. And I just think that it's so helpful to hear someone else's story and say, oh, that's similar to my story, or, oh, I totally relate to that, or, maybe there's something else in that story that fits your story a little bit. better. And I just want to encourage you that it is absolutely possible for you to stop leaking. It's absolutely possible for you to recognize your body again and to feel like that body is doing exactly what it should be doing. And I want to offer that hope to you. And I also want to offer to you to schedule a Your Pelvic Floors call, or Your Pelvic Floors Next Step call with me, or fill out the Your Pelvic Floors Next Step form. And I'm personally the one who takes that phone call with you, or is the one that replies back to that particular form that you fill out. So with that, I want you to remember that you're an heiress and a queen and everything in between. See you in the next one.